Okay, maybe I'll just ask you a few questions in case others also have some. So I'm hoping I won't take up all of the 7 minutes. But yeah, just first of all, as usual, thank you so much for allowing us to do the work we do. Thank you for supporting the entire virtual group, and thank you for supporting the workshop. And I think that when I met you at the same workshop that I met Carl at like 5 years ago or something, I think it was really like an entirely different space. So I would love for you to perhaps give us, like a taste of like you as an investor, and having even published a book on that space like a while ago. What for you has changed, and where would you encourage people at this workshop to kind of look for new frontiers today?
Right. Wow. That's a really big question.
Very big question.
And thank you for all the work that you do putting these things together, because it's really, was that 5 years ago or 6 years ago?
5 or 6 years.
That's when I first met you, I think, because you had just joined Foresight. And I've been involved with Foresight for a very long time. I can't even remember how long. It might be like 17 years or something.
Yep.
So I've seen the industry and this group really, really evolve. And I met people at that workshop 5 or 6 years ago that I'm still in contact with. There's 2 nanotech people that I met at that workshop. One of them has started a company, and I'm helping her with it.
Nice.
And she was at Google X before, and UCLA. And the other one is in Texas doing a whole bunch of innovative stuff. And so it's like these groups are really incredible that sort of, at least for me, are forging long-term relationships. So that's what you have to look forward to. But what I'm excited about these days, I'm excited about the explosion in interest in this field, for one thing. But I think the thing that's changed for me so I wrote a book called 100 Plus, How the Coming Age of Longevity Will Change Everything. It was published in 2011, when most people were not thinking about longevity, or if they were, they really didn't know what it meant, and like they didn't health span, what is that? And like it was very new back then. And when I went on book tour for what seemed like forever, for probably like a year and a half, I was going around the world talking about this issue. Everybody was very excited about it, and I come from the public policy world, so I kept thinking, well, how are people going to criticize me, right? Like I have to be ready for the critics, right? And so I had my public policy like readiness on, and throughout the whole thing, everybody just loved it. But there was one thing that I was waiting for, and no one ever did it. No one. Because I have a chapter in the book on all of the incredible science that's changing the world, and how we can repair ourselves and rejuvenate ourselves, and like there's all this evidence, right? But the one thing that was missing from that evidence that nobody ever picked up on, including scientists, was the brain. There just wasn't very much happening on the brain back then. Or like the stuff that was happening, it was just so far away that it was hard to conceive how that was really ever going to rejuvenate us and change our lives, right? Unless there was some kind of full body, small molecule drug that rejuvenated everything all at once, right? But now I think there's a lot more very exciting work happening on the brain. There's Sergio Pasca doing the organoids at Stanford, and Ed Boyden doing his imaging work at MIT. And
he's also a fellow at the Institute.
Yes, and Jean Hebert at Einstein doing regenerative medicine on the brain, starting with strokes, but hopefully the whole brain at some point, repairing it. And so there's a lot of really super interesting things happening in the brain space that I'm really excited about. But
you already pointed out a missing topic here. So if any one of you has an interest in this area, is working on it, get a question up there. It has takers already.
It's hard because it's kind of the last thing that it's harder to do.
Yeah. Anyone here wants to shout out a frontier in brain aging that you think is totally undervalued? Maybe I'll give you more time. Oh yes, shout one out.
Understanding, I think, the metabolic, connection with diseases of aging, especially the brain.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we chart it. It's my first time, so.
Wonderful. Anyone else? A specific one? Yes. Cosmo in the back.
Virology.
Yeah.
Say one sentence about it.
Viruses cause dementia.
Okay, that's enough. So if you guys want to collaborate on bringing something on brain aging up there, then please, please, please do so. Okay, wonderful. Maybe just, Yuri, go for it.
Yeah, brain reprogramming and how reprogramming can affect memories in a negative way. So one uncharted area. So. we're doing brain reprogramming, but like how it affects memory is still an open question.
Well, we have one reprogramming talk today, so you can either merge with general reprogramming or really go for neuro.
Yeah, I think inflammaging, the rise of inflammatory cytokines, which cruise right across the blood-brain barrier and wreak havoc, I think that's super interesting.
Cool. Maybe my last question to you, to give other people also space to ask, in case they want to ask Sonia anything, is, for projects here, let's say that we'll be presenting later, what do you look for, like as an investor? Like what kind of like, how can you tell that, that there's something that you would particularly be interested in investing? What's like something where you're like, oh, that usually I've seen not go so well?
Well, in terms of investing, the team really matters. Like who's leading this thing matters. And do they have the right mindset about what the future might look like? And so, and that's very different from like, does the science work? Like this, okay, great, the science works, but what team is going to take that science and commercialize it? I mean, that's what I really focus on. I mean, is the team prepared for commercialization? Do they have the right skills in place to do that? And oftentimes, I'm just going to say this because most of you are scientists. Oftentimes, the scientists don't want to give up control, and they cling on to everything, and then the company just doesn't go anywhere. So I also look to see if the scientist is willing to work with a smart business person and willing to give up that organizational control, not the scientific control, the organizational control to kind of get things moving. So the team is super important. And then I look at like what stage is the science at, right? Like, is it really ready for commercialization, or is it still sort of a science project that's kind of in that in-between
Foresight
space?
mode.
Exactly, where it needs a little bit more time before it can come to fruition. So those are the two main things I look at.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, Larry.
Yeah, I think getting a good sense of what can get in and what get into the brain. I mean, that's usually the big barrier. There's only like 500 metabolites that have been mapped to the brain. The drugs, we might know about 100 drugs where we know like the brain to plasma ratio, but it's not great. Antibodies typically can't get in, and so what you can do to modify the brain stuff, getting a better understanding of things like Parkinson's. We know that some chemicals are causing that, but can you reverse it? Can you slow it down? Things like that. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it's just putting the data together and things like that. And then for mental health, I mean you got things hitting all kinds of receptors, and it's still kind of shooting in the dark at a lot of things. For most of the drugs for bipolar or schizophrenia or things like that. It's it's like oncology 20 years ago where you can't figure out what to do.
Yeah. Anyone else? I think Brad, you also had your hand up there.
A bit untenable and kind of too far out, but like memory preservation and like the connectome of the hippocampus, I think actually is approachingly more relevant a topic than we think, because it feels a bit, to me from my perspective, to be a bit of an engineering and technical problem with replacement of the brain at this point, after seeing what I've seen with neonatal mice, radioglial neurons travel along born mice and actually integrate into that network. So it feels like it's so close that it'd be nice to have some sort of real strong impression of what memory is, where it lies, whether it's in the strength of these synapses, so we can kind of like preserve it as we start to do more like radical things in the next few decades.
Yeah, we're having a big whole brain emulation workshop. That's our next one on the list in Oxford, because everyone's AI timelines have been shortening. And so people are now arguing for a Manhattan Project for whole brain emulation. And it sounds sci-fi, but like there's a ton of work actually happening right now. Like E11 is a wonderful FRO that's doing a ton of work, like at least like, on the actual like slicing and mapping part. And you can run things much faster now. So at least, there's other work in our neurotech group that's also relatively relevant for this. Okay, I want to give you guys the space to ask questions. Yeah.
Just want to mention a low-hanging fruit. We have all those very sophisticated approaches where we repair the brain, we change the brain, but we speak very little about brain health, mental health. A big killer in the United States is poor mental health. And all approaches that can improve that will be extremely effective into increasing longevity. And for now, psychiatry is so far behind. The drugs that are being used right now have been developed in the 50s and are very ineffective.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited about the organoid work that's happening at Stanford, because they can grow little pieces of the brain and see what drugs are actually doing to them and how the cells are reacting and all of that.
Great. Okay.
Maybe this is another low-hanging fruit, but I'd love to see a therapeutic that really takes advantage of some kind of understanding of the ApoE4. It's the biggest risk allele in Alzheimer's, affects millions of people, and it's a pretty solid linkage.
Good. This is something to work on later today. We don't have to solve it right yet, but thanks already for bringing a few ideas out there. So I really encourage you to bring it up on the whiteboard. Yes.
I mean, I'm just tying together some of the points raised. Can we find a pathway that connects stress, metabolites that travel to the brain, and brain aging? Is there a threshold, and thus aging of the brain, does it happen like punctuated equilibria? I mean, there is no brain aging for some time, and suddenly because of stress something happens, and you get a spurt of brain aging. So I would love to find approaches to answer those questions.
Please bring it on there. Okay, do you want to leave us with any final closing remarks?
Well, I'm just super excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what all of you have to say, since you're the experts. So please come and chat with me later if you've got some interesting ideas that you think I need to hear about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sonia.